When I was a kid, a pretty little kid, I think maybe like 11-ish or so, in church, I remember our church had this thing called a missions conference. Raise your hand. Anybody remember like the days of a missions conference kind of a deal? Okay, so like maybe a third of you. For the 2/3, here's what happened. For some reason, they gave flags from a bunch of countries to all of us little kids, and we were like kind of paraded around through the church with the flags. And between the kids, it was always a fight, like who got the coolest flag. And so I don't remember much else besides the fact that one year at least, I got Brazil's flag, which was like at least green, it wasn't like all the different regular red, white, blue kind of colors. And so I was really excited to carry Brazil's flag, and I marched around with that flag. And that brings up the topic that I want to talk about today, which is the topic of missions, right? So missions. And you're probably thinking, well, missions, that's pretty simple, right? Like you go and you share. And that's, at a certain level, that's exactly right. And so Jesus himself said he gave the great co-mission, right? Think about this, together, mission, the great co-mission, which says go into all the world, so go everywhere, or as you go, wherever you go, and make disciples, or as we've been saying recently around here, make apprentices of Jesus. So in a very basic form, the mission, right, is relatively simple. However, and this gets very interesting, and I'm going to get to this at the end of my time sharing today, once you get past the idea of what is the mission, there's some other questions, like who is a missionary and where exactly should we go, that actually become quite interesting. And maybe what I want to try to share today is that the answers to those questions are not what you always have in your brain about that kind of thing. As you know, we've been going through this series called Summer of Psalms, which I think is funny because if you take the S out of Psalms, you get palm, and it's like summer. But I completely understand that nobody else really thinks that's funny. What we're doing is we're trying to combine the idea of a topic and a psalm. And so the topic today is mission. The psalm is Psalm chapter 2, and we have like another ingredient in the sandwich, which I won't comment on like that ingredient, but is going to be Jason and Crystal Horner are going to come and share some of their experience as missionaries in England. Here's Psalm 2 in a nutshell. So 3 kind of points about Psalm 2. First verse says this: why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? Why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? And basically, as it starts out, Psalm 2 is basically saying this: everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, people are going against God's desires, right? We call this sin. This is the idea that folks go outside of the boundaries of what is best and right and good for us, and we do things on our own way and not under God's authority or his rule or not under his way. And everywhere you look, no matter the continent, no matter the country, no matter the county, we have more and more people that are saying, I'm going to do things my own way. Psalm 2 goes on in verse 6 to say this. This is God speaking. As for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. As for me, I have set my king on Zion, that's Jerusalem, my holy hill. And the idea is basically this. Everyone's plotting against God, right? We're going outside of his authority, and God says, I'm going to put a king on the throne. And we now know on this side of Jesus that that king is Jesus Christ. And as we just sang about, Jesus is beautifully loving, because what he did is, even though the nations raged and plotted right against him, he came into flesh and he died. He sacrificed himself for our good. And that got Jesus on the throne. But Jesus on the throne is not to be trifled with. And I think a lot of people have this sense that Jesus is, he's fine, he's cool, he's a friendly kind of guy, this kind of thing. But the Bible clearly talks about that at some point, he's going to bring ultimate judgment. He's going to bring ultimate judgment. And we have a choice, we all have a choice to either submit to him as the king, Lord of the earth, or to choose not to. Psalm 2 ends this way: serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. for his wrath is quickly kindled. Last sentence. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. And so Psalm 2, in a nutshell, is basically missions, right? Nations rage and plot in vain. God put a king on a throne through Jesus' death and resurrection. And now, blessed are all who take refuge in that king. And missions is basically spreading the gospel so that more and more people take refuge in that king. It's as simple as that. So like I said, that's probably not surprising information, especially to a bunch of people here in America that come to church on a Sunday morning and that kind of thing. What I'm about to say, I think, might be surprising. When I was a kid, we had missions conferences, like I said earlier, and so we all carried around flags, and this represented this idea that our church was sending out missionaries to go to oftentimes unreached people groups throughout the world. And a lot of the places they went included places like Africa, South America, and Asia. And what's really interesting is this, that mission has been working, right? It's not working perfectly. Certainly there's bumps in the road. There's missionaries that kind of are concerned a little more about making people like them than they are about the gospel. But for the most part, the gospel has spread into those places, specifically Africa, South America, and Asia. Now, I'm going to say this as plainly as I can. The church is in most decline in Western Europe, precisely where Jason and Crystal are ministering, and not too far behind is North America. I want you to let this soak in a little bit. In the 1700s, 1800s, the Great Awakening happened, started precisely in England, and came precisely to America. And that began this movement of sending missionaries all throughout the world for hundreds of years. And they did that, and it's worked. But now those two places are the places where Christianity is going the most downhill. It's likely, a lot of folks do this analysis, and it's likely that by the year 2050 or 2060, the significant center of Christianity is going to be in Africa, in South America, and in Asia. And there's questions like, what would it look like if 4% of Americans go to church on a monthly basis? And you might think I'm sounding kind of alarmist here, but I'm just saying that happened in England. Could it happen here? I think there's two implications of what I'm trying to say for us here and now. The first is this. As you know, I've been trying to get up here on a very, very regular basis and say we need to think intentionally about how we're reaching out to our community. Because what happens if our community, right, if Milroy and Reidsville and Belleville and Mifflin County becomes the unreached people of the world that we used to send folks to Africa to find? Like, what happens if that's the case? This is precisely why I'm so excited about having Emily on board and why I keep talking about what are we doing intentionally here in America to say we're all have a part in sharing the gospel of Jesus to people right around us. Second implication is this. I want to say very clearly that there's absolutely no battle about where to do missions. There's no battle about that whatsoever. Should we do missions in England where 4% of people go to church on a monthly basis? Absolutely yes. There's a lot of people there that need to hear about Jesus. Should we do missions in Mifflin County where more and more people are being raised in a culture that doesn't, obviously honor God in their actions and is biblically illiterate and all these kinds of things? Like, should we do missions here? Absolutely yes. Should we do missions in Africa and Asia and South America where the church is growing in leaps and bounds? Absolutely yes. Like everywhere there's people, those people need to come under the blessing of the lordship of Jesus Christ. And so I just want us, I hope what I'm saying today does two things. I hope it motivates you to say, there's not such a thing as like Christians and then up here are missionaries. Because if you're a Christian, you're a missionary. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I also hope it helps us, as Jason and Crystal come and share, that we can think through not just how to encourage and support them in their work, which is very challenging because they're in a place where culturally Christianity was booming 300 years ago, but it's not doing the same thing now. But we can learn from them because my sense is, if the data continues the way that people say it is going to, apart from God, of course, he can do whatever he wants. But if it continues, this is the kinds of things that we're going to have to be thinking about here in Mifflin County as well. And so with that, I'm going to invite them to come up to share. How about a round of applause for Jason and Crystal? Thanks.